Most people, when they think about the roots of economic wisdom, jump straight to Adam Smith, Karl Marx, or maybe Aristotle if they were really paying attention in class. But hidden in the silence of the medieval world is a truth most textbooks never mention. It's nearly 1,000 years before modern markets. Interest rates or monetary policy. A Muslim thinker sounded an alarm that still echoes through every recession, every bubble, and every financial meltdown we live through today. He warned that when money drifts away from morality, societies don't just stumble, they crumble from within. And judging by the global economy around us, he may have understood our world better than we understand ourselves. Welcome to the Capital Decode, where history, money, and power intersect, where the past is never as distant as it seems. To understand Al-Ghazali, one of the most compelling and multidimensional thinkers of the Islamic Golden Age, you have to picture a world standing at the edge of transformation. A world that feels distant in time, yet strangely familiar in its problems. The year is the early 1100s. Europe is fragmented, recovering slowly from centuries of instability, while the Islamic world stretches across continents as one of the most advanced civilizations on the planet. From Al-Andalus in the west to Persia in the east, its cities pulse with energy, trade, and intellectual ambition. Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo aren't just political capitals. They're global hubs of scholarship, science, finance, and commerce. Libraries rival palaces in grandeur. Markets overflow with goods carried along vast trade routes. Silk from China, spices from India, silver from Central Asia, textiles from everywhere in between. Caravans move like rivers across deserts, carrying not just products, but ideas. Philosophers debate metaphysics, jurists refine law, astronomers chart the stars, physicians write medical works that Europe would later translate centuries afterward. And in the middle of this thriving world, a new kind of challenge emerges. Wealth. Rapid, transformative, destabilizing wealth. Cities grow larger, merchants become richer, social classes shift, inequality expands, old systems strain under the weight of new economic realities. Prosperity brings opportunity, but also temptation. And as always, when societies grow quickly, questions grow even faster. It's in this world that Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rises. Born in 1058 in Tus, in the region of Persia, he quickly becomes one of the most brilliant scholars of his age. By his mid-30s, he occupies a prestigious teaching position at the Nisamea of Baghdad, essentially the Harvard of its time. But what makes Al-Ghazali so remarkable is not his status, it's his restlessness, his refusal to accept easy answers. His ability to look at a world full of wealth, innovation, and ambition, and still ask, what is all this doing to us? Because something he believed was going wrong beneath the glittering surface. Markets were expanding, but morals were contracting. Society was becoming richer, but not wiser. People were chasing profit, but losing purpose. An economy that looked strong from the outside felt strangely fragile on the inside. You don't have to look far to see the parallel. Al-Ghazali began asking a question almost no one before him had articulated so directly. What happens when a civilization becomes wealthy faster than it becomes ethical? It was a radical question for his time, and arguably even more radical for ours. And to answer it, Al-Ghazali did something unusual for a religious scholar of the medieval world. He examined money itself. Not just its mechanics, but its meaning. Most Western readers are surprised by this part. They think of medieval scholars as theologians or philosophers, not economists. Yet Al-Ghazali was among the earliest thinkers to analyze money through a moral, psychological, and systemic lens. Aristotle had explored its purpose. Later economists would model it mathematically, but Al-Ghazali probed something deeper: how money shapes the soul of a society. How it alters incentives, how it influences trust, how it can lift nations or corrode them from the inside. To understand his economic insights, you must first understand his view of money's nature. To Al-Ghazali, money was never meant to be worshipped, hoarded, or treated as a symbol of worth. It was a tool, a facilitator of fair exchange, cooperation, and social harmony. He compared it to a mirror, worthless by itself, but invaluable for what it reflects. Gold and silver only mattered because people trusted them enough to trade through them. And from that foundation emerged one of his most profound principles: hoarded money is dead money. To him, wealth hidden in vaults, buried underground, or locked away for display wasn't just useless, it was dangerous. Wealth that doesn't move can't feed families, pay workers, support trade, or sustain communities. It slows the economic bloodstream. It suffocates the collective prosperity of society. And in Al-Ghazali's eyes, that suffocation was not just an economic flaw, it was a moral one. But Al-Ghazali's critique of hoarding was only the beginning. Once he established that stagnant wealth harms society, he turned to the next, even more corrosive force: speculation. In his world, just like in ours, markets were filled with people looking for shortcuts, merchants who withheld goods to spike prices, traders who spread false rumors to manipulate demand, opportunists who treated crises as profit-making windfalls. Al-Ghazali had no patience for any of it. To him, speculation wasn't cleverness, it wasn't strategy, it wasn't business acumen. It was corruption, profit extracted without contribution, gain earned without value, wealth built by exploiting instability rather than supporting society. Whoever profits from the suffering of others, he wrote, profits from corruption. And corruption, in his understanding, was like a disease. Once it infects the markets, it spreads upward into institutions, outward into communities, and inward into the soul. If this sounds like a description of modern housing bubbles, crypto pumps, price gouging, or crisis profiteering, that's because the human behaviors driving them haven't changed in centuries. Medieval or modern greed is portable, yet Al-Ghazali was not anti-trade, not anti-profit, not anti-market. He wasn't calling for a monastery economy or an ascetic rejection of wealth. He believed deeply in commerce, considered it one of the noblest occupations. But he drew a sharp line between earning and exploiting. Markets, he argued, only work when built on honesty. When weights are rigged, information is hidden, or defects are concealed, trust collapses, and the economy collapses with it. Without ever using modern terminology, essentially laid the foundation for ideas economists now call information asymmetry, transaction costs, and moral hazard. He saw centuries ago what scholars label with equations today. Markets are made of trust, not numbers. Break the trust, and the numbers follow. Another part of his economic thought centered on labor. Al-Ghazali believed that work carried inherent dignity, while unearned wealth carried inherent danger. Money earned through productive labor builds discipline and gratitude. Money gained through manipulation erodes character and destabilizes society. This wasn't moralizing. It was a recognition of how incentives shape behavior. Societies flourish when people contribute more than they extract, and they falter when extraction becomes easier than contribution. But perhaps the most striking part of Al-Ghazali's economic worldview was his uncompromising critique of state manipulation of money. Medieval rulers sometimes diluted coins with cheaper metals to stretch their treasuries, a quiet inflation tax imposed on the population. Al-Ghazali condemned this outright. To him, debasing currency was not fiscal policy, it was theft, betrayal of the trust that holds a monetary system together. When rulers tamper with currency, he argued, the poor suffer first, confidence weakens, and economic stability erodes from the top down. He believed the state should protect markets, not distort them. He warned, destroy prosperity faster than any enemy when they manipulate money for short-term political gain. Those warnings weren't abstract theory. He had watched rulers, governors, sultans, and local authorities raise taxes to unbearable levels, seize merchant property, debase currency, and implement desperate financial measures whenever their political power wavered. Every time, he observed the same pattern. Once leaders lose integrity, society begins to mirror them. Corruption at the top, in his view, spreads downward like a poison. When rulers cheat the people, merchants feel justified in cheating customers. When officials manipulate coinage, traders manipulate prices. When institutions act dishonestly, individuals stop feeling responsible for acting ethically. The entire economic order becomes a chain reaction of distrust from palace treasuries to neighborhood markets. And Al-Ghazali's conclusion was blunt. A society can recover from poverty, but it cannot recover from corruption. Economic collapse, he argued, rarely comes from a lack of money or resources. It comes from a breakdown of trust, the invisible glue binding every contract, every transaction, every currency, and every institution. From here, his ideas about currency take on deeper meaning. He believed monetary stability depended entirely on collective honesty. When states tamper with money, they chip away at the very belief system that makes currency valuable. And once people stop believing in their money, they look elsewhere, to gold, to foreign currencies, to anything stable. History has validated his prediction countless times. Weimar, Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and every nation whose people abandoned their own currency because trust evaporated. Money, he understood, is ultimately a promise, and a society that cannot keep promises cannot sustain wealth. But Al-Ghazali's economic insight did not end with coins, rulers, or markets. He understood something deeper, something modern economists often struggle to quantify: the human heart. In his view, economic instability wasn't just a technical malfunction, it was a moral and psychological unraveling. People hoard out of fear. They speculate out of greed. They cheat because shortcuts feel easier than discipline. They manipulate money because money is the easiest thing to manipulate. And when enough individuals start rationalizing unethical behavior as normal, society begins its slow descent into collapse. That realization led Al-Ghazali to one of his most important conclusions. You cannot fix an economy unless you fix the incentives that drive human behavior. Laws matter. Markets matter. Institutions matter. But beneath all of them are human beings driven by emotion, ambition, anxiety, and desire. If a society's incentives reward exploitation instead of contribution, corruption instead of honesty, speed instead of stability, then the economic system cannot help but drift toward dysfunction. This is why Al-Ghazali emphasized the moral dimension of wealth with such intensity. Wealth wasn't inherently evil to him, it was simply incomplete without responsibility. A flourishing society emerges when individuals use their resources to uplift, not dominate. When the pursuit of prosperity is balanced by the duty to protect the common good. When ambition is tethered to ethics instead of appetite. But once wealth becomes separated from responsibility, once profit is pursued without regard for consequence, once status replaces service, the system becomes brittle, fragile, vulnerable to shocks. A selfish society, he warned, eventually collapses under its own weight, dragging down even the wealthy who believed they were insulated from the fallout. These ideas might sound philosophical, but they formed a practical diagnostic tool for understanding economic decline. And when you look at the modern world, it's hard not to feel the relevance. We live in a global economy where money moves faster than meaning, where inequality widens year after year, where speculation is often rewarded more than production, where financial bubbles inflate predictably, burst violently, and then inflate again with uncanny regularity. The institutions that once anchored stability, courts, regulators, governments, are increasingly seen as untrustworthy or inconsistent. Everywhere you look, you see echoes of the problems Al-Ghazali warned about. His critique of hoarding resonates in debates about billionaire tax shelters, offshore accounts, and concentrated wealth. Warnings about speculation align with concerns over crypto volatility, leveraged markets, housing crises, fueled by investor buying, and shadow banking systems operating with little oversight. His condemnation of currency manipulation mirrors modern anxieties about inflation, central bank policy, political interference in monetary systems, and the quiet erosion of purchasing power. And perhaps his most prescient insight is the one modern society least wants to confront. Trust is the foundation of prosperity. Nations with honest courts, predictable regulations, transparent governance, and reliable institutions tend to have stable currencies and resilient economies. Nations where trust erodes tend to experience crisis after crisis, no matter how much wealth they appear to possess on paper. What's most striking for many modern readers is how little the world has actually changed. Technology has advanced, markets have globalized, information moves at the speed of light, yet the underlying human impulses shaping economic behavior remain exactly the same. Al-Ghazali would likely look at the world today at the skyrocketing debt, speculative frenzies, political division, institutional decay, and widespread distrust and repeat the same truth he wrote 1,000 years ago. Where justice is lost, prosperity cannot remain. It is an uncomfortable reminder. Economies rarely collapse because they run out of resources or because mathematical formulas stop working. They collapse because trust evaporates. Because institutions fail to uphold fairness, because the incentives reward the wrong behaviors. Because human fear, greed, and impatience override long-term stability. And that brings us back to Al-Ghazali's central message, the idea that makes him not just a medieval thinker, but a timeless economic philosopher. Money is not a mechanical device. It is a moral ecosystem. And when that moral ecosystem is ignored, dismissed, or corrupted, the financial system begins to break long before anyone notices. His writings remind us that the health of an economy depends on the health of the people running it. Their honesty, their discipline, their ethics, their sense of responsibility to one another. The world may have changed, but the underlying truth has not. No society survives when the pursuit of wealth outruns the pursuit of virtue. Al-Ghazali saw it in his time, and we see it in ours. And unless societies learn to align morality with money, prosperity will always be temporary, rising fast, collapsing faster, repeating the same cycle Al-Ghazali diagnosed nearly a millennium ago. It's a sobering reality. Economies rarely collapse because the mathematics fail. They collapse because the people inside them do. They break when trust evaporates, when the incentives push individuals toward shortcuts instead of integrity. When institutions forget that fairness is the foundation that allows markets to function at all, human fear, human greed, human impatience, human self-interest, these forces, not economic equations, are what pull civilizations toward the brink. And Al-Ghazali understood this long before any modern economist tried to measure it. He wasn't offering theology disguised as economics. He was offering economics grounded in human nature. He recognized that money is not just currency. It is a moral system. And when that moral system fractures, the financial order fractures right behind it. That's why his ideas matter now more than ever. In an age of rising debt, speculative bubbles, institutional skepticism, and global uncertainty, his message becomes a warning and a shield at the same time. A society that divorces its money from its morality is building its collapse in slow motion. Understanding that isn't just education, it's self-defense. Because history may not repeat, but it absolutely punishes ignorance. And if this opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe. History has the answers, and I'm here to uncover them with you.